One of the conversations that seem to come up with my patients as we talk is genetics. And we have recently made a lot of advances in terms of genetic assessments and learning about genetic information. And there's commercial companies that you can send like a saliva sample off, and they'll send you back some genetic information regarding your ancestry, and you can often take that information and then directly, or you can use like another third-party application to plug in that information and get some data about your genes. And I get some questions about that, and one of the questions is like, how do my genes determine my health outcomes? And we used to think there was a very direct correlation between like your genes and then the outcome, like your genes determine your destiny. And in fact, we were so hopeful that we could figure out someone's genetic profile, figure out what diseases they were susceptible to, and then make alterations, even perhaps even at the genetic level. But it turns out that that's really not turned out to be super fruitful and helpful. But it still is an important piece of information. And so the way that I use genetics in my consultations with my patients, if they have genetic information, we'll use it. And sometimes in cases we will use genetic information to make some determinations. But I'm always trying to formulate a puzzle, and I feel like genetics is just a piece or two of that puzzle. So I don't rely on genetics solely, but I like to use that as information in terms of equipping us to make decisions about their health. For example, a lot of people have heard about this gene called MTHFR. It's been around for a while. It was sort of first made useful by the psychiatry establishment, and they recognized that this genetic alteration in this particular gene could influence the rate at which your body uses some B vitamins to both create and process neurotransmitters. And they figured out that if you had this SNP, or this genetic alteration from normal, then you're more susceptible to certain things that may occur in mental health, like anxiety or depression. And if you knew if someone had this, then you could use supplementation, actually high-dose methylfolate or high-dose B vitamin, B9, to alter the methylation and basically the formation and breakdown of these neurotransmitters. So I use information like that. Turns out MTHFR also has something to do with cardiovascular risk, cancer risk, oxidation, blood pressure, many other things. And so if someone has that information, we use it. But one of the things that we also keep in mind is like this phenomenon called epigenetics. So genetics is sort of the way I explain it. Genetics is the blueprint sort of that's laid out. If you're trying to build a house, then we establish this blueprint that then the architect has made, and then your framers and your construction guys can then go and follow and make the house. So the genetics to me is kind of like the blueprint. One of the cool things we have learned more about in the recent decades is this phenomenon called epigenetics. So the way I look at epigenetics is we have the blueprint and then we have the house. But with epigenetics, we can actually take the blueprint, kind of like we would take the blueprint of a house, and we, instead of laying it out, we can actually fold it in different ways to get a different outcome. So we can actually take this blueprint and fold it up in a certain way, and then see what information is laid out and make a slightly different house. And so we can take the same genetic information, and under different conditions of stress and nutrition, we can fold that blueprint slightly, and we can get a different output. So we don't rely solely on genetics, because epigenetics can also play a role in health outcomes, but we do look at them. And there's just many other factors: heart disease risk, susceptibility, again, to conditions like depression and anxiety and cancer and things like that can be very helpful. I tell people genetics loads the gun and your environment pulls the trigger, and your genes do not dictate your destiny, but they can be a helpful piece of information as we make decisions about what's best for you going forward.